Senator Padilla.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Not sure I'm following the train of thought in the previous answer to the previous question, but let's move forward here. Now, under the DISCLOSE Act, organizations spending more than $10,000 on campaign-related activity would be required to disclose any donor who contributed more than $10,000, which is, in my opinion, a large sum of money, to fund that activity. Donors who give less than that amount would not need to be disclosed. So this sort of basic transparency would not affect small dollar donors, but would reveal the small segment of society that is spending tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands, in some cases even millions of dollars, to influence the outcome of elections and, by extension, public policy. I think disclosure would also help voters and citizens broadly understand who's trying to influence and why. Sounds like common sense policy. Now, those that seek to use their outsized wealth to gain an outsized voice in elections and policy shouldn't be able to do so anonymously. Yet critics claim that forcing disclosure of these large donors will subject those individuals to harassment or danger. Mr. Weiner, I know we touched on this a few minutes ago, but can you respond to the specific criticism that donor disclosure will lead to donor harassment?
Of course. Thank you, Senator. I think that we should start with a common premise, which is that everybody in our society deserves to be safe when they engage with the political process. But I am mindful of Justice Scalia's admonition that requiring people to stand up in public for their political acts fosters civic courage, without which democracy is doomed. So yes, it is not acceptable to harass donors. It's not acceptable that violence is not acceptable, but the right to speak is not the right to speak free from criticism. And, you know, we have had millions upon millions of Americans who have been subject to disclosure at the threshold for candidates, and actual harassment and reprisals are rare. There is also, I would like to note, an exception in this legislation for donors who face a real threat to their safety as a result of donation. So I think in the vast majority of cases, no, this is not actually a serious concern and a good objection to disclosure.
Okay, thank you for that. Before I ask my next question, which is specific to the Citizens United case, I sort of take a step back and look at the impact, not just of Citizens United, but Shelby v. Holder, right? It seems that in the last decade, the Supreme Court has specifically made it harder for some people to vote and easier for the wealthy to influence elections. Bad combination. Now, in Citizens United specifically, the Supreme Court unleashed a torrent of unlimited political spending, billions of dollars in the last 10 years, on the basis of two assumptions. And correct me if I'm wrong in this analysis. Number one, that spending would be accompanied by both independence and transparency. The court reasoned that if expenditures were independent, that they would not necessarily lead to the undue influence or corruption. The court also reasoned that transparency would safeguard political integrity. So, Mr. Weiner, also for you, in the decades since the Citizens United decision, how have these two assumptions underlying the court's holding fared? Are independent expenditures actually independent and transparent?
Well, thank you, Senator. No, they are not. Many, many, many independent expenditures are actually, of course, carried out by groups that have close ties to candidates. And what you see is also obviously fundraising for these groups, with candidates and elected officials attending, and even donors being able to lobby for their favored policies. And then, of course, as we've been discussing, neither are many of these expenditures transparent. So I think neither of those predictions, as sadly with many of the predictions in Shelby County, have proved to come to pass.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator Padilla.